Hello and welcome to the Josh and Tyler Show, the Tyler and Josh Show. Today I'm here with Tyler Wolf, as always, with two F's for fucking fantastic. Today, I realized something, Tyler. I
What's
was
that?
sitting there thinking and just going over my picks and refreshing my brain on the silent films I picked that I've been watching or have watched in the past because I've been watching silent films forever. We are film nerds. We did Oscar live action shorts, documentaries. We are film nerds, and I am very happy about it. How are you?
That was one of the most bizarre intros we've ever had, but I'm doing quite well. I'm doing a lot better, thanks. How
Good,
about
good.
you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Yeah, today we're talking about silent films, so films that do not have audio, except for music. Music is allowed. So films that do not have dialogue specifically in the audio department. So any film that you could sit and say anything made from around 1903 to 1930s when they were doing before the talkie pictures came in, right with the end with the beginning of the jazz singer there. And as there have been a lot of silent films that have come out since in these methods. Now, to be considered for my list, they do have to be features for me. There were a lot of silent films that were shorts or revolutionary or groundbreaking that I did put on my honorable mentions, but they weren't quite shorts. They were test shots. They were the beginning, the origins. I was watching one and I was like, wow, this is 117 years old. So, yeah, I do have do you like silent films, Tyler? Are you a fan?
In general, I like them, but it's one of those circumstances where individual moments or certain scenes tend to play out a lot better overall than the actual movies itself. And narrowing down six that I thought were consistently good from beginning to end were really tough to do because, first of all, silent movies have more than one genre. They can be horror, they can be straight up genre or drama. Why did I say genre? But
Genre
anyways,
drama. Oh no.
they can be just about
Yeah.
anything except for a musical off due to obvious reasons. But unless people count Interstellar 5555, which I haven't seen yet, but
I have never heard of this one.
really, it is a
No,
movie by
there's
it
a
is a
lot of
movie by Daft Punk.
Okay. I haven't seen it, but now that you mentioned the Daft Punk movie, that's what I know.
Yeah, it's the one everybody remembers because they did another one that I can't remember the title to, and it was actually live action.
Daft Punk
I'm
makes
not
some
sure.
pretty good music, but it does get repetitive after a while. I mean, how long can you listen to All Around the World while saying one phrase with one beat for 10 minutes? Get Lucky's a great album. Oh my goodness, love that album.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Random Access Memories is pretty good too, but yeah, there's a lot of silent films. Did you have any honorable mentions for you that did not quite make the list?
Um, Tell you the truth, there really aren't that many just because, again, it was hard to narrow down a list of movies that were consistently good from beginning to end, that consistently stuck to one specific tone. Because a lot of choices I have on here actually kind of go back and forth between comedy and drama, especially like my silent era picks. Because we were talking about this before the recording. Everything that Josh has on his list was probably before the 1930s compared to me, where I have 1930s selections that cover half my list, and the other half are modern day silent movies that I have actually covered a few of on my channel in anticipation for the original A Quiet Place, because I thought, you know what? This would be a great opportunity to remind people that, for one, you don't need to talk nonstop in a movie for something to actually happen. And two, silent movies still exist. In fact, if I got to be honest, if I were to make movies, I would at least want to make one silent movie just to show that it can be done and it can be done well.
The Artist would probably be the last big silent film that came out.
I'm
What
amazed. I'm amazed that it got as much Oscar consideration as it did, let alone winning Best Picture. I'm not saying it was bad. It's just it was such an oddball choice, but as many people pointed out, it was a lot better than any of them could have ever guessed. And it's the type of movie that couldn't be made in Hollywood because even though there are American actors in it, like James Cromwell and John Goodman, this is actually made in and produced in France. It has that Luc Besson thing where it just seems American based on the aesthetic design of it, which is actually what makes it pretty decent. Just the fact that it blends in so seamlessly.
Well, I'll drop a couple honorable mentions on since I have a page.
Wow.
1908, The Great Train Robbery, one of the first action adventure shorts, is really, really great. It's only 5 minutes, but it's absolutely fantastic the way you use the crowd reaction shots. The original 1915 Birth of a Nation, the way they photograph a room and light a large Congress-style room. And Metropolis. I think this is pretty good, but everyone has talked about Metropolis to death. You got a couple honorable mentions there for me, Tyler, right?
I really only have one or two in the grand scheme of things. The first one I can think of is Harold Lloyd's Safety Last. There are a lot of good things going for it, especially with the last half hour, which is basically Harold Lloyd climbing an actual building. And it has that memorable shot of him hanging from the clock that is so iconic that Jackie Chan ripped off that exact same stunt in Project A back in the day. So
yes, I
one of his most famous stunts, considering it took him a few days just to get up to that clock. And when he finally did the stunt, he was not satisfied with how he landed and fell, so he repeated it 3 times.
Sounds like a Jackie Chan. I do second Safety Last. That is one of the most iconic short films. It's also really funny, very clever. I do enjoy it very much.
It's all right, but there are some problems, and it reminds me of an entry on my list, a Chaplin entry on my list that I think does that formula a lot better. But yeah, that's right now, that's the closest thing I can think of to an honorable mention, because I spent like a solid few days. Oh, and there's another really good honorable mention. The only Chaplin movie I saw this past week that's not on this list is The Gold Rush. Yeah. It has some really good sequences. It has a fantastic bit involving wind blowing through a house and how the doors just blow everyone away, literally in and out. It was such a great moment. It has the bread dance that everybody remembers. Yes, it also has a very weird way of balancing out the comedy and drama, and also has a romantic lead that was kind of unlikable, especially when you don't know for sure if she was taking the tramp seriously as a romantic lead or not. Because if I gotta be honest, that part just completely slipped past me.
Yeah, I will second The Gold Rush. This is my favorite Charlie Chaplin one that you gave me. I've never been a huge Charlie Chaplin film. I just think his films have iconic moments, but the rest of his acting does nothing for me. Interesting fact. My brain is blanking, but United Artists was founded by Charlie Chaplin and a couple other very famous people because they didn't like any of the contracts available to them, so they started their own studio.
Yeah, they wanted complete artistic control. They were basically the pioneers of having Final Cut and just having that auteur theory to it.
Oh my goodness.
And then Michael Cimino fucked it up with Heaven's Gate, and from then on, directors just did not have the same amount of power.
Yeah. I want to throw in here 1927's Hitchcock, The Lodger, about a serial killer. I watched that one this week for the first time. Absolutely fascinating film. I never knew Hitchcock did silent films. I mean, the logic that he did would be there, but The Lodger is very interesting if you get a chance to check that out. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or whatever that one, the Dracula film.
Caligari.
Yeah, that one's really, really interesting. I've seen it a few times, and I just think it's been talked about to death. And there's only so much you can say about early Dracula films. As much as I like a good Dracula film, I think Christopher Lee's Dracula for the Hammer years was the most interesting one for me. I do like Bela Lugosi's Dracula, and I've seen a bunch of these, but for me, that was there. Sherlock Jr. with Buster Keaton. I love Buster Keaton. He's one of my favorite performers of all time. I adore everything this man has ever done. There is one on my main list, the one that I think deserves it, but as a Sherlock Holmes fan and someone who appreciates Buster Keaton, this is it. I will say Jules Verne 1902 Trip to the Moon short. It's 4 minutes and it plays, what's the movie it plays before? Around the World in 80 Days, it plays before that. They have the moon and they did 3D sets and matte paintings, and it's Jules Verne's Trip to the Moon in sort of an operatic style. They have it before the original Around the World in 80 Days, if my memory serves me right. And it's very iconic. It was considered like the first real success in film. One that I grew up with as a child, because yes, I watched silent films as a child, Aladdin and his Wonderland. It's like the first version of Aladdin. It's a 40-minute version of Aladdin from 1906. They have the big old sets, and it's very quirky and fun, very dated, but for me, this holds a lot of nostalgia. Cecil B. DeMille's 1927 King of Kings is a very interesting film because he went on to do the Ten Commandments, which is a really, really big one, and a huge production of Cleopatra. And it's really interesting to see where he came from because you got to start somewhere. I got two more honorable mentions here, and I want to go a little in depth about these because I don't feel qualified to talk about them because I've watched them once, but I feel I need to watch them twice or more to really dive deep into them. And the first one here, Robin Hood from 1922. This was Mary Pickford's husband, who was the other guy who established. That's the person who established it.
Douglas Fairbanks.
Douglas Fairbanks. They did a 1922 version of Robin Hood. This was the fourth attempt. By 1922, they had done 4 versions of Robin Hood, starting in 1908. But the scale, the battles, the massive sets, all the stunts were done by Douglas Fairbanks because he was an acrobat. And it's just a really, really cool take on early Robin Hood that I very, very much appreciate. And I really think I got to find a copy of it. I don't know why it's not. There's one, I think Criterion is lacking silent films. I went on there and I couldn't find it, very few of them. One is on my list here, which would be my number 6, but not a lot of silent films, and that's very. You think they would preserve silent films? That seems like a very Criterion thing to do. Even if you did a collection of silent films, like you could do a collection of Harold Lloyd shorts or whatever, you know what I mean, or Buster Keaton or any of those guys. But Robin Hood has Alan Hale playing Little John. This is the first time he played Little John. Alan Hale, most famous for being the skipper in Gilligan's Island. He played it 3 times between 1922 and 1938.
God.
So I just think that's really, really interesting, and the stunts are good, and like the way they use the frame and the motion, and there's some really, really interesting coursework there. The one I fully encourage you to check this out. I watched it this morning. It's called Haxan, or The Witch's Curse, I believe it's a translation. It's I believe it's a Bulgarian film off the top of my head, but don't quote me on that. It's a horror film from 1922. Basically, these priests unleash a demon, but oh my goodness, it is dark. Like the way they use the shadows and the visuals, and the devil rises up from behind a book in like a chapel and takes a priest's soul, and they're sacrificing babies and people are burning alive. Oh my goodness, it's awesome. It's like you can tell it's fake, but they were really trying super hard. Oh my goodness, what a film. If the trailer alone says it all. It's really gross at points too. Like there's gross amounts of blood and stuff. But this silent film is like nothing I have ever seen in my actual life. I watched this yesterday and I was like, holy crap. Yeah, and the way that just the sets and the shadows and the way they use the looming moon and the burning alive sequence looks way too realistic to be set on film. I feel like they burnt something alive there. Haxan. It's Haxan. It's from 1922. Oh my goodness. If you have not seen this film, wow. It's like, I think it terrifies me more than actually watching the Conjuring film because of what they're trying to achieve. So
well, I got nothing to add to that.
But yeah, so those are my honorable mentions. There's just so many silent films I love. Tyler, jump in with your number 6 here and tell us about a silent film you love.
Okay, well, my number 6, I'm starting things off with a Charlie Chaplin selection, and he has this interesting formula in his sound era silent movies, because a lot of people don't realize this about Chaplin. He was one of the few people who instantly disregarded talkies because he couldn't imagine the tramp carrying out a conversation, or at least telling a joke in that vein. So to his credit, he rebelled against the system, and for a while he was actually really successful at doing so. Some of his most acclaimed movies of all time are actually his sound era silent films, but they all have this formula where it starts off as the basic slapstick comedy that you would expect from The Little Tramp. But once he begins this friendship or romance with the romantic lead, it turns into more of a political drama that has some satirical slapstick bits here and there. And sometimes, like my first choice, that does get in the way of the entertainment value. It kind of slows down the pace, or it just isn't as interesting as the intricate and well choreographed routines that he is known for. But for this movie, even when you're not laughing your ass off, there's a lot to enjoy about the circus. Now, for those who don't know, it starts off very simple, where the tramp is mistaken for a pickpocket, so he has to escape from the police, and a lot of really clever routines involving him trying to escape a mirror house. First, when he's trying to chase down the thief to set things straight, then he goes back in when the cop discovers him, and basically some of these same events play out, but it's so well timed and the footage is sped up to make it seem a lot more funny that it works to a great advantage. They have to pretend to be animatronics at a playhouse, and the best part is when the thief has to pretend along, the tramp has a mallet so he can actually hit him and laugh. And that part was just hilarious, to the point where he goes to the circus as the last ditch attempt, and it leads to a scene involving him, a cop, and a merry-go-round that I do not want to spoil because it had me roaring. And the ringmaster realizes that he has the potential to hire this guy as a clown, but he comes to the point where he realizes that the tramp is only funny when he just doesn't realize it. So he comes up with a very clever scheme to hire the tramp as a property guy, someone who brings props onto the set, but he knows that he's going to fuck things up. The audience is just going to roar, and he doesn't have to pay the guy squat. So already there's that anti-capitalist message that he is known for. But even though there are definitely some routines that still make you smile and have your jaw on the floor because of the amount of shock value and the fact that Chaplin did all the stunts himself, when he accidentally locks himself in a lion cage, he is really in there with a lion. And it makes you smile and just be completely surprised that they did that. But like I said before, it never really reaches the height of humor that the previous routines that I mentioned had. But like I said, the dramatic stuff does hold it together when he starts to become friends and becomes romantically attached to the ringmaster's stepdaughter, who he abuses in so much more explicit detail than I thought you could get away in a silent movie. And this actually features the tramp at his bravest, because he's willing to beat up the ringmaster, even if it means costing him his job, just to protect her from harm's way, because he knows what an innocent and very sweet-hearted person she is. But at the same time, and without spoiling anything, this is one of those movies where the main two don't actually have a happy ending. And it's very bittersweet, but what sets it apart from other Chaplin movies is that, without spoiling anything, the two characters have a choice as to whether or not they could have a happy ending. But one of them decides that it's just the right thing to make certain sacrifices for the happiness of someone else. And it feels weird saying that a movie with no dialogue can make you feel sad, and sadder than most modern dramas, but it actually works for that reason. And it would have been a lot more effective if the romantic lead was an interesting character, because that's the main problem. She goes by Circus Rider, that's her character's name, but we never even see her do anything in the circus. So there's like next to no backstory whatsoever. The most we know about her is that she's a victim of domestic abuse. And that part definitely is unsettling because, and I'm going to try and get this guy's name right, Al Ernest Garcia is one of the most memorable silent movie villains of all time, not just because of how clever he is at manipulating other people to his advantage, but he's just so cold and calculating and just has absolutely no respect whatsoever. And his expressions just make him seem so damn intimidating. And, you know, other than the fact that the lady has no backstory whatsoever, it's just once it switches to dramatic more than comedic, it does lose a lot of steam for me.
That's the one thing I find with Chaplin films. I find that there's some really great comedic moments, and then the rest of it, yeah. I mean, Chaplin is a trailblazer in his field for independent film, for comedy, but I just don't get the man. I like some of his routines, but you know, just as a whole, I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And oddly enough, my number one actually is a choice of his, but I feel like I lucked out by watching that one as my first silent movie, and then the others just didn't capture the same amount of magic to him. But One of them definitely came close. That I can safely say.
Yeah, Chaplin always has charming moments, and the lion sequence. I did rewatch this one or half of it this week, and I enjoyed what I saw, but I was just waiting for Chaplin to be funny. Like that's what I was sitting there waiting for. And I
Yeah,
think
and
at the
there are a
time,
few.
I think we've been spoiled with great at comedic actors who can be funny and dramatic, and I just think the dramatic doesn't fit for me for Chaplin as much as I like.
Well, I mean, I've heard that his dramatic talkies have a little more heft to them. Like people seem to really enjoy Limelight, where he's an alcoholic clown, and Buster Keaton is oddly enough his partner in the performance. But I haven't heard that much about it. All I know is that it took decades for it to get to the States because Chaplin wasn't necessarily blacklisted, but he was still suspected. And the fact that it took decades to get to California and the fact that it played in Los Angeles during award season, that's how Chaplin got his only competitive Oscar for Best Original Score because dude composed all of his movies.
Yeah, and then there's that very interesting. I would say I think I appreciate more the Robert Downey Jr. Chaplin biopic.
That one's okay. I didn't really think it delved that deep into his talents. It had more to do with the crappy personal life that he had, which don't get me wrong, they
And I
delve
appreciate
into enough, but it got melodramatic after a while.
Yeah, I just don't do clowns, so this one doesn't hit as much for me. Never
No,
liked
that's
being a
totally fair.
child. I don't. I'm glad clowns are a thing. I just don't care to see or be around them.
Limp.
But yeah, very solid pick though, Chaplin there. So my number six is one that I've watched several times. Battleship Potemkin. I don't know if you've seen this film.
I've heard of it. I know that it has that scene with the baby carriage on the stairs that De
Mhm.
Palma ripped off in The Untouchables.
Yes, it did. So I always like a good military movie, and I'm the first one to say I'm a sucker for, watching Pearl Harbor or like whatever Gerard Butler is throwing out there because he protects the president. Like they're guilty pleasures for me. So if you can give me anything on a ship or anything with a crew, for military or action oriented, I think that's me. That's me in a nutshell when it comes to like guilty pleasures.
Fair enough.
Some people like to watch, and I'm probably gonna really enjoy Army of the Dead because I do enjoy a stupid zombie movie from now to then, and I enjoy a stupid comedy. There is a place for the silly, stupid movie, and I like that. So, Battleship Potemkin came out in 1926. It's a Russian film. It focuses on a crew that basically have rotten food being eaten by maggots. They're supposed to support the Russian Revolution of the previous years. Again, I have to go to my notes because it's a silent film. Yes, just getting the name. Yeah, and so they mutiny when they say this is what you eat, or you die. They shoot a couple of the members, and the crew mutinies. So this is anti-government piece for the Russian government, which is really really interesting because they don't like to do political films or portray political films unless it portrays what the government has. And this was very anti-government at the time. So they take over this boat. There's some really cool fight sequences there with the fast forwarded camera that works really well with the large scale. This boat, we see the cabin, we see the guns, we see all these different places in the kitchen, very well dressed sets. And they land in a small town to get fresh supplies and fresh food. And this here is incredibly interesting too. When they get to the town, there is a person going around because this is right after World War One, which was around the earlier years in the 1910s and such. I'm forgetting the exact thing, but they have the Russians and they use a sort of propaganda character as this guy who goes around and is basically saying that the Jews are terrible and they're this and that, and the whole town basically rebels against this man and beats him to death, and then supplies this group of people, and that's where you get the carriage sequence and all this stuff in this small town and the people, and they build these relationships. They get back on this boat, Battleship Potemkin, and they're going out to fight the carrier, and they basically are like, we're going to take a stand. We want our freedom, sort of thing. That's what they're going for. But what they really do that's very touching in this film for me, again, this is really old, so if you haven't seen it, Well, too late. I'm spoiling it. I won't spoil the full end because I do think it. I'm not really sure if I like the ending, but all the villagers, because it's a fishing village, come out on their boats and wave as these people go off with fresh supplies to basically take on the Navy. And I think it's a really touching moment to see all these villagers that we got to know supporting them. They only go a little bit. The boat gets out into waters. We have a little bit of a scuffle, and then they just sort of float on by. They just want they don't want war. They want peace, and that's the message of this film. And I think it's a very interesting film because of the themes it portrays. It's very anti-government. It's very setting up the themes of World War II, before World War II. It's beautifully shot. I mean, the way they reload the guns, the way they show the boats, the way they cut the footage together, you can tell they have different sources because they couldn't really, film the same boat shooting the guns. The way the soldiers react, the facial expressions. My favorite bit is when the guy is sleeping on his bunk and he goes like this for a minute, and they have a shot. They have the silliness, they have the humor of the soldiers, but it really paints this human story about these people who want to eat, who want to do their thing, and they don't want the government to interfere with it. They want them to fuck off. And I'm like, this is really great. And I've watched this about 3 or 4 times now. And every time I get something a little more out of it. The way they use the black and white is very, very effective. They use sort of a brown chrome for the guns too. So they did have early versions of color grading. So it is some of the first versions of color grading you will see. Color grading when you isolate the spot and put a specific color tone on that to exemplify a tone or emotion. And they do that with the guns or the meat and such. And it's a really, I think, groundbreaking silent film. I think it's one of the very first, truly great silent films. Because there's a lot of fun silent films, and there's a lot on my list that I will say I like for different reasons. But I think this is the first film, and I think you could remake this in the 1950s and really, really add to it. But maybe you couldn't. Depends on the director. So I'm going with Battleship Potemkin.
That does bring up an interesting point. I'm not entirely sure. I don't even know if any silent films have ever been. You know what? There is one silent romantic comedy that got adapted into a remake that I know for sure, but
that's on my list.
It was a Chris O'Donnell rom-com, so I'm pretty sure that's not it.
Well, if it's the one, I think this one was adapted into multiple things. So. We'll get to that one. But what do you got for number 5?
This has got to be the weirdest selection on my list because it's hard to explain why I think it's a good movie. My number 5 is called
I love it.
Bear with me on this. My number 5 is called Away, and it's about a young boy who's the sole survivor of a plane crash, and he parachutes down onto this really weird island where he's being chased by a giant shadow monster that drains the life of anything it touches. And when this kid goes into this safe zone where the shadow can't enter, there's a motorcycle, a canteen, I think there's a backpack of other stuff, a map, and this injured bird that he starts to take care of. And after a couple days in this zone where he's definitely comfortable and safe, but is also incredibly bored out of his mind, he decides to take all these resources and venture out to the island using this map to find the one piece of civilization that happens to be on the other half of the island. And he encounters a lot of very strange scenarios that I don't want to delve into. Now, this was a Latvian animated film by a guy whose name I'm going to butcher as I say this. Gintz Zilbalotis. I'm just going to say Zilbalotis from the rest of this review because that's the closest I can get. He spent 3.5 years writing, animating, and composing the score. He did this all by himself. And weirdly enough, he was writing the story as he was animating along. And even if you don't like this movie, you got to admit, the effort really goes to show the fact that one guy can spend years on Maya software to create a film. But regardless of that, there are definitely some silent film fans and some animation fans who even they would probably be bored out of their mind with the end results of this movie, because even though it's 75 minutes, it is unbelievably slow. We don't really learn anything about the main character for sure. Everything else is up to interpretation, and for some people that's going to be a problem. And the animation, when you look at it, is a lot more on par with a storybook or a computer game as opposed to an actual movie, especially with the way none of the characters and none of the settings have lines tracing on the outside. So it makes them look incredibly flat. And the color schemes are incredibly basic. But at the same time, like any low budget directorial debut, it's what you do with the limited amount of resources that makes it work. Even though the animation itself is incredibly minimalist, Zilba Lotus, I don't know why I forgot my own nickname here. He uses so many cinematic techniques that make the movie feel unbelievably large in scope and actually gives it some live action qualities to it. For one, there are some shots that actually feel as if they were handheld. And whenever an animation does something handheld, at first it's a little distracting, but it blends in so seamlessly along with the rest of the camera work. There are a lot of tracking shots filmed in these massive wide shots that capture just about everything. There's one shot in particular where I remember the kid is walking up a mountain and it starts with basically a bird's eye view, but it zooms in as the kid is walking. And then the shot ends in basically a medium of him looking at the rest of the island, looking for any signs of life. And it feels as if it's a Spielberg oneer where it's designed to look like a bunch of scenes cut together when really it was done in one entire shot. Or easily the most iconic moment of the movie, he comes across this lake where a herd of elephants are walking on the lake. I'm not kidding when I say this. So he takes his motorbike and he rides on it. And because of the reflection of the water, it really does look like he's riding a motorcycle in the sky with all these clouds. There's a flock of birds that fly next to the water, and it adds so much beauty to an already outstanding shot. And it ties into the story where the little bird, once it's completely healed its wing, decides to fly alongside this flock possibly forever, even though the kids worry that he is still going to fuck up his wing again, or he just doesn't want the bird to leave. And there are so many subtle details and one-off moments that add a lot of interpretation as to what this kid's story is and what exactly the type of journey he's supposed to be going through. How does he know how to ride a motorcycle? Maybe his parents taught him how to do it. Maybe he had one of those miniature dirt bikes. I have a neighbor kid who has one of those and has been riding motorcycles ever since. Why does the bird matter so much to him? Well, other than the fact that he's completely isolated and has no one else to talk to, caring for this bird gives him a purpose. And when he lets go of this bird, that could be symbolic of the fact that dude parachuted from a plane as if he has been thrust away from the life that he has, and he has to survive on his own with the skills and resources that the adults in his life taught to him. There's so much to take away from this movie. And for me, that's the real beauty of it. It's minimalistic, but there is a lot left up to imagination, and there is a lot to think about, even though there are definitely some slow parts of the movie, and sometimes the limited amount of animation does hamper it here and there. But outside of that, I'm really glad I saw it, and I would totally watch it again.
I'm fascinated by the earth tones here. The way I'm just looking at the image I have right now, hanging from a tree with a parachute. Just the use of the browns in the tree is very interesting. The green forest he's in, like giant sort of lily-looking pad. The orange and brown desert that uses that perspective piece. The this bridge that's fascinating with this wire framing. The elephants on the lake is the Sahara, and he's riding his bike. It's just, what are with these cats is my question.
Oh, that is the most trippy sequence in the entire film. Those cats, and are you looking at cats like walking alongside a turtle?
Yeah, what is that?
Let's just say that they all find this magical stream, or at least it's implied to be magical based on the effects that happen to everyone that drinks it, including the main character. I don't want to spoil what it is, but it felt so hypnotic and entranced. It made you, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I mean this as a compliment. It is supposed to make you feel like you're falling asleep. But see that shot right there? Like the amount of perspective, and the amount of, and the sheer scope. I mean, seriously, who could accomplish a scope like that on their first movie?
Like, look at the colors on this. I really just want to highlight this because I am mesmerized by this animation. Just great
That's
color tones. Just really great stuff. It's beautiful. This here is like, wow, this looks like if you made I'm particularly entranced by this shot here. I love the textures on the rock. Um,
the
there's your
mist under the bridge.
yeah,
There you go. There you go.
yeah, there's the writing. Just fascinating.
It's
It reminds me,
gorgeous.
there's these cats again. Like, I don't even know.
Oh, you're better off going in not knowing.
That's good. The one I'm fascinated about is this. This is shot is ripped right out of the 2014 Tomb Raider reboot. And I love what he did with it, making his own, the way the plane crashed and the title sequence. And it's very sort of Tomb Raider inspired with its colors. I like the look of this. This
It's
is
very much
fascinating.
video game inspired in
Yeah.
case like the whole plot of just having all of your resources just plopped right there and the fact that there's a safe zone where the shadow monster can't go into. It is a video game movie
Mhm.
that's completely wholly original and that's just part of the charm.
My question is here: how is this not nominated for Best Animated Picture? I
You
see
know
that
what? I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember if this officially came out in 2019 or 2020. I
it's
saw
got a bunch
it.
of awards, but like not a single Oscar nom. Like I feel like this is Oscar bait right here. Like this is I just feel like there's not enough
Yeah,
money behind it to push it. You know?
yeah, it's insane. Like I don't know what festivals it went to. I only saw it
Uh,
during the New Year's Eve weekend where it was on this one animator's best animated movies of the year list because he worked on Wolfwalkers, so he showed it. And then in his Twitter feed, he posted a picture of Away. And when he talked about how minimalist it was, I just sat there and I'm like, okay, I would totally go
yeah,
for
it
that.
went
And I ended
to
up
the
finding it. And
yeah.
on one of my more rougher nights of the shitstorm that's this lockdown, this movie did
Yeah.
make me feel a lot better.
It was nominated for an Annie Award, for the Faroe Island Award, the Latvian National Film Festival,
Latvian.
Strasbourg European Fantastic Film Festival, and the Vilnius International Film Festival. I think this just looking at the visuals, it looks like it deserves an Oscar nom. Please, just give one.
I would have nominated it. I'm not sure if it was just the quality of it or the fact that for a lot of people, the lack of dialogue just made it tougher for them to identify with the story. And I can understand that, but I mean, this is Jerry with stakes. Like it's not just wandering around not doing jack shit. Like there is a story. It's just a very simple one, but it's so simple that we can instantly identify it. We want to reach this civilization or at least any group of people that could possibly help get you home or can at least if
Mm-hmm.
you're orphaned because of the plane crash can at least take you in or something like that.
I'm fascinated by this. So if it was to be in the 2019 Oscars, it would have been up against Toy Story 4, How to Train Your Dragon, I Lost My Body, Klaus, and Missing Link. You could have easily took out Missing Link. Done. If it was going to be in this year's Oscars, Soul, Onward, Over the Moon, Sheep, and Wolfwalkers. You could have easily took out Shaun the Sheep movie or Onward. I would say drop.
I would have taken out Onward. I feel like
Yeah.
I feel
This
like
could
people
have
would have
fit.
protested. I feel like people would have protested if Over the Moon didn't get in there just based
Oh yeah.
on the cultural significance that a lot of people really like about it.
So my number five is I've always had a fascination with the character of Joan of Arc, and there's a 1928 silent film, The Passion of Joan of Arc or La Passion of Joan of Arc. This is a French film, and it basically chronicles a trial. There's been a lot of other films made on Joan of Arc. I think the character is one of the most fascinating in medieval history or in sort of castle ages at that point in time when it was going out of the main the I guess that would be set in because castle was 1740 to about 1800s. So this would be near the end of the 1800s where castles were still a thing and they had battles and such, but it wasn't so much in the chivalry era. It wasn't like during the Crusades. It was the third failed crusade. I love medieval history, so this is me. But this follows Joan of Arc as she's basically on trial, and they say no, no. And you could paint this as a tale of women doing things if you wanted, but I just think it's a great story. Um, a lot of people paint it as women's freedom. So anyway, so she's on trial because she's in battle and she's a woman and she's says she's doing something for her faith or whatever. And so the priests don't like her. She shaves her head. She gets in sackcloth for her last mass communion after many years in jail and gets burnt at the stake. That's the story. It's been done 1,000 times, but I think this one's really really interesting because it does have the performance here. Maria Falconetti. This was her big breaking out performance. This was like the big Jennifer Lawrence in Hunger Games of the 1928, or like Grace Kelly in Rear Window, or one of those huge performances that people just remember forever, regardless whether if they've seen the film or not. Have you ever seen that meme with the nun sticking her tongue out?
I don't think I have.
Okay, well, there's one of those, and that comes from this version of Joan of Arc. One thing I think it does really well, it's really weird. It's a weird thing, okay?
Okay.
The one thing I think this film does exceptionally well is we open up on an 8-minute shot of just Joan of Arc speaking. Just speaking at her trial, solely focused on her character. Before we get anywhere else. And it has the interludes, the cuts with the dialogue of what she's saying and stuff. It is in French. So again, you just sort of have to make it up. But the emotion in her face is very, very strong. And then we get to see the priest and we get to see the trial. And there's a lot to take in this film. And then she gets burnt at the stake at the end. And it's a very, very powerful, emotional moment. And I just think this film was way ahead of its time with character work. If they're on this list, there's certain aspects I admire of them. The character work from Maria Falconetti is absolutely fantastic. This film would be a run-of-the-mill average, cool, it's a medieval thing without her lead performance. It's like a star-making performance, and this really launched her career to do a bunch of other stuff. But for me, this is the definitive Joan of Arc. Like, if you ask me what's my favorite Hunchback of Notre Dame, I will take 1938's Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is a black and white film, which I've seen many, many times. I just think some of these black and white films nail these stories. I have seen the color versions and the updated ones. I think there's a 2008 one. And again, they're not bad by any means. I just think this one nailed exactly the emotion in her face without showing the battle, without doing this. Just straight up, here's the trial. And that opening 8-minute shot is just, here is Joan of Arc. Gives you the whole movie right there. So I'm going with Joan of Arc for number 5.
It's a very interesting choice. When I think of a Joan of Arc movie, I think the Robert Bresson version seems to be the most famous just because it's Robert Bresson. You do touches anything and it turns to gold if you're a Criterion nerd or anything like that. Well, yeah. I mean, that's what we're told to believe, isn't it?
I'm just trying to remember what version that is. I've watched so many versions of the story, but this is the one.
Well, I think he only did talkies, so it would have been like the 30s or 40s.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it was before or after A Man Escaped, but people tend to remember
Joan of Arc. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I have seen this one, yeah. This one didn't really blow my mind. I didn't mind it. I watched this on TV a couple times as a kid.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, Bresson doesn't do stuff to blow your mind. He just does stuff because...
Oh, yeah.
But still.
So what do you got at number 4, Tyler? That's a big old question.
Well, much like Away, my number 4 is a very simple story told without dialogue, but through visual metaphors. And it's also the original Away, considering this was made first. It was made with a much bigger budget by an Oscar-winning director who was most famous for making 3 to 8 minute shorts. And when Studio Ghibli and Wild Bunch Studios decided to make a movie together, Ghibli liked the shorts from this Wild Bunch director in particular, whose name, again, I'm not even going to butcher, even though it's French. I probably would have gotten it better. But in any case, it's also a story about a singular person stranded on an island with no way of getting out. And that movie is The Red Turtle.
That's a silent film?
The Red Turtle is a silent film. I mean, there are sound effects, there are music, there are a couple sequences where the main character screams in frustration, but outside of that, not a single word, which is really impressive because this was this director's directorial debut in terms of feature-length films. And for a guy who had only told stories over the course of 3 to 8 minutes, it's really impressive to see him do something at like an hour and 20. Now, granted, it's an hour and 20 counting, credits and such,
Okay.
but still, so just for further context, because the story is considerably different from Away, this is about a sailor or someone who is working on a ship who has been marooned on an uninhabited island, but he's incredibly resourceful and ends up cutting down bamboo trees and building them into rafts so that he can escape. The problem is, every time he does so, he is approached by this turtle who doesn't harm him or any of the other creatures in the ocean, but keeps on destroying his rafts and preventing him from escaping. And it raises so many questions as to why is this turtle so angry with this one person? Is it angry in destroying the rafts because this guy cut down the trees in order to escape? And if so, what gives this turtle the right to decide whether or not this person deserves to stay on the island or return home? In fact, how else is he supposed to return home? This movie raises so many questions about humanity and nature coexisting, how the benefits of taking away resources from the planet are worth the extra costs if they are so. But unlike most other Ghibli movies, it doesn't actually really pick a side. It tells us what the benefits and the weaknesses are with each argument, and just lets you decide whether or not it's best for this man to live on this island or for this man to live in civilization. And it goes without saying, like any Studio Ghibli movie, this animation style is incredibly outstanding. It is beautiful to look at, but the animation style and the overall visual style actually stands out a lot better than other Ghibli movies to great effect. For one, the character and set designs of the sailor feel slightly more gritty, with the way the brush strokes in the lines on his hair or in his clothes just add a lot more texture to it. And the color grading seems a lot more photorealistic, that makes everything have its own texture and feel completely tangible. Blue and green obviously really stand out the most, given that there's this lush, very vibrant bamboo forest that this main character relies on for food, shelter, and of course to make his damn rafts. The ocean is as crystal clear as you could possibly get. There are so many sequences that are just our main character swimming alongside other animals, and it looks absolutely breathtaking to see. And there are some actually very trippy dream sequences that are trippy because of the lack of color. They all take place in the nighttime, and the moonlight makes everything on the island look black and white, as our main character is imagining certain scenarios involving his wife and son, which that actually takes up half the movie, where it's this hypothetical what if scenario.
So
and
what's with the Mozart people?
What's that?
What's with the like the classical violins on the beach?
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't remember that scene, but
okay. Well, when you finish, I'm just curious.
But in any case, like, everything looks so surreal as the sailor is imagining scenarios that we know good and hell well aren't really happening. Like the fact that he is flying alongside the ocean, doing so many amazing feats that he really wishes he could do in order to just get the hell off of this island. And much like Away, it's the fact that it leaves so much up to imagination that just makes it so investing and so gorgeous to look at. But it's also crystal clear that it is more about representing the circle of life and trying to represent it in a 3-act movie as artistically as possible.
Yeah, the image I'm looking at here, I'm just going to share my screen quick. I'm just really curious about this image here. What's happening here?
Huh. I don't actually remember that scene, so I couldn't really tell you.
Because I was looking at this and, like, again, I really just want to show the animation.
But like I said, it's in black and white. And I forgot to mention, what makes the visual style stand out a lot is that our main character is mainly shown in these massive wide shots that make him look incredibly small in comparison to his new surroundings. And it really captures the isolation that he's experiencing and how that's starting to take a toll on him. Like I said, crystal clear water, very fluid, very symmetrical, the way he's lined up with the other animals. The music is just incredibly well done. One thing most people don't talk about with silent movies are the music. And with my number one, I'm definitely going to talk about that. But like I said, black and white scenarios just feel so surreal. And that image there definitely adds a lot to it. And one thing I'm realizing now is that dude does a really good job at piecing each scene by giving them a beginning, middle, and end. And then once that scene is over, it'll fade to black. And then that plot line never repeats itself as it moves on to the next scene, the next scenario, and the next message that this director is trying to portray in the imagery.
Well, I know you have the poster. I know you're a big fan. I just wanted to show the visual art because it looks fantastic.
Oh,
Ghibli
absolutely.
movies
It
are
looks
always known for their art styles.
and it looks a lot more
Yeah.
rustic because I mean, the great thing about Studio Ghibli is that it always tries to be as clean and pristine as possible in regards to the facial features. And this one is a lot more rustic and run down just to highlight the more gritty scenario and gritty environment that our main character is stuck in.
Yeah, for sure. My number four is The General by Buster Keaton. So this is, for those of you who don't know, the very famous train scenes where he's riding the front of the train.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what this one is known for. So this one is interesting. Because I love Buster Keaton. This may be my favorite Buster Keaton flick. I think I've seen this enough times, so yeah. It's known for the big train chase, for the collapsing bridges, for him going along the front while he's gathering logs on a moving train, like just life, death defying stunts. It's also very, very funny. Because Buster Keaton never says a word because it's a silent film. But Buster Keaton has this sense of making just sort of serious things funny. It's very comedic in the sense of the 1920s. So this came out in 1926. And I just think that this film has some of the most excellent stunt work I've seen in any of these 20s films. Because there's a lot of films with fight sequences or horses. And I just think this one takes the cake for stunts. Because Buster Keaton was one of the best stunt people. You could make a case for Harold, blanking.
Harold
you know,
Lloyd.
yeah, Harold Lloyd, or you could make a case for Charlie Chaplin or a couple of these other guys. But this one, I think, just really gets spectacle right. This movie, when it came out, it made no money. People didn't like it.
Really?
People just thought this movie wasn't great, and they were like, "Huh, we don't like this Buster Keaton movie." And then years later, it's become much appreciated. I am waiting for a criterion of this. I want a criterion of The General. It also takes place during the American Civil War, so it does have Confederate soldiers as well. And Buster Keaton is like playing both sides, just trying to get the girl. It's very quirky and clever. But I think you get all the great sequences of the train and him trying to get on the train. And he's got that sort of, he doesn't really walk onto something, he'll jump onto it. He's light as a feather. It all seems effortless. It's really, really great action. And there's the final scene of the movie is, they finally run away from the other train and they get to the station and he gets the girl and he goes to kiss her, but he's a little shy about kissing her, right? So he goes to kiss her and looks around and people look there. So he finally just decides to kiss her, right? And when he does that, everyone walks by and he has to salute them like this every time they walk by because he's part of the other army, you know? He's just sort of playing both sides. He has the uniform on. So he like hides the uniform with the girl and tries to kiss her, but like he can't get to her lips right away because he has to salute. And it's just this really clever like minute sequence. And then he finally gets the kiss and it says the end. And it's beautiful and it's perfect. And I love The General. I want a criterion of this. Are you listening, Criterion? Give me this one. This one. I love it. I'll pay for it.
I would pay for it too, just based on the description. I mean, Buster Keaton has probably been one of the most analyzed silent directors when it comes to the stuff that we do. There's an Every Frame a Painting video that I actually watched yesterday that really just sums up how fantastic he was and how great he was at visual storytelling, how insistent he was on visual storytelling.
Yeah.
Because according to him, the average movie used about maybe 200 title cards, and apparently the most he ever used was 56. Dude was incredibly insistent on miming it out. He was incredibly insistent on doing everything himself. When you were talking about the train sequence, I was instantly thinking of him grabbing the one log to throw on the other log so it would just fall off the train tracks and everything would go smooth. and then all of a sudden the bridge would just come crashing
Yeah.
down. And I cannot believe that they did that. It just
It's
it
great.
seems like such a waste of money, especially given the time period that they were in where money was extremely tight. But he was also really good at workshopping, because back then you were allowed to workshop stuff. There's, I think, one movie where he makes a diving board to go from one building to another, but he misses the drop. So the next day, he actually added in on that, where he's hanging on to dear life from a pole. And that's where he, like, where the pole bends and he goes through a window, down a pole to a fire station. And when he sits on the back of a car to just relax, the car takes off, and he's just like, that is just such an iconic scene. It's such a highlight of how willing and physical he was, because even when he was terminally ill with cancer, he still did stunts on a funny thing happened on the way to the forum, where he was just on a merry-go-round and was incredibly deadpan, because as much as he used his entire body, his deadpan expressions are just completely priceless. His hat blows off by the wind, he just pulls another hat on and just holds his cane over top of it. There were so many great routines and so many great callbacks that he did, that if streaming services had Buster Keaton movies that were silent, they would be on this fucking list.
Well, see, here's the thing. They're public domain, most of them.
Some of them are, but like they
Some of them
come in
aren't.
really
So,
crappy qualities.
I watched it on public domain. It's free on YouTube.
Well, like, I believe that. It's just, I don't know why they're so hard to get for most of us.
I wish they would do like a really nice Buster Keaton collection through like, even if they did 2 or 3, like through Criterion, or even just a standard, like just a standard Blu-ray with all the.
I'm surprised they haven't. It seems like my next 2 Chaplin choices are the only silent Criterions that they had, which don't get me wrong.
Battleship Potemkin is on Criterion. That's what.
Oh, they do. Okay, good.
What do you got at number 3, Tyler?
Well, my number 3 is my next Chaplin pick, and it follows the exact same formula I had mentioned before, but Chaplin shows here that he has improved upon creating fully fleshed out romantic leads. And I think that's why people close, that is on here.
Oh.
That is on here, but what I just said before, I think that's why people consider City Lights to be one of his best movies, and also one of the best romantic comedies. And I 100% agree, which is interesting, because I don't like romantic comedies because of how incredibly forced and more plot driven the romantic plot lines are. And in this case, for those that don't know, it's about a blind girl who mistakes the tramp for a millionaire when she is selling flowers to him. And once he realizes that's the way she figuratively sees him, he keeps up with this charade mainly just out of fear that he'll disappoint her. And when he realizes that she and her family are in a financially tight spot, he decides that he's going to do everything he can to raise enough money for her before it's too late. And that plot line was incredibly cliched even back then. And it reminds me a lot of Safety Last, which was done first, and is also about a poor guy trying to support his fiance while also telling her, I'm a wealthy man, I'm one of the heads of this department store, even though dude can't accomplish shit. The difference here is that Safety Last features a main character who is so unlikable because of what a gigantic coward and liar he is, and the fact that his girlfriend is fucking stupid even for that time period, where every misunderstanding she causes, where she sees her fiance walk out of a manager's office and she's just like, oh my god, he's the manager, my fiance is so rich. And I'm just like, yeah, even back then, the stereotypes were not that bad. So I don't know what the fuck was happening there. But when it comes to City Lights, the tramp and the blind girl actually accomplish everything they do by working as hard as they can and being true to themselves. The tramp especially is willing to take any job he can in order to raise as much money as quickly as possible, especially during a boxing match that is one of the funniest and most suspenseful sequences that I have seen in a long time. A sequence that feels a lot more advanced for a silent movie because the sequence was filmed in much longer takes than you would expect. And because Chaplin had more of a budget than he ever had before, he could actually do a lot more tracking shots that give the backgrounds a lot more flavor in terms of visual aesthetic, but it also draws out the anticipation and makes the punchline seem so much better. And of course, the setups and the punchlines are all done in the exact same frame, so it actually feels a hell of a lot funnier. but dude's even willing to beg for charity from others in order to raise money. And he has that opportunity when he rescues a drunken millionaire from committing suicide over his divorced wife. And the fact that the tramp has this fundamental philosophy about how life is hard, but that's no reason to give up. And the way he encourages other people to do the same is not only what makes the relationship between him and the blind girl seem incredibly authentic, and also, even though he's technically lying to her, he's doing everything else as straight-laced and serious as possible. But the millionaire, when he's blackout drunk, appreciates the gratitude so much that he returns the favor to the tramp by giving him gifts like this Rolls-Royce car, or taking him out to so many luxurious events like this incredibly hilarious dinner and dance club where the floor is made of ice. And I don't want to spoil anything else because that routine, I cannot believe, was choreographed. It felt improvised, but that really just goes to show how much of Chaplin's perfectionist attitude leads to so many memorable and iconic roles. But like I said before, the millionaire is grateful when he's blackout drunk, because once he's sobered up, he can't actually remember any of the events that happened that day, so he doesn't remember who the tramp is. And the tramp can't guess whether he's sober or shit-faced, but he still approaches him with the opportunity of asking for money or for favors because he knows that beggars can't be choosers, and he decides to take the chance anyways. And just like Modern Times, the ending itself has a way of making a bittersweet outcome feel like a happy ending because the characters have come so far, and the end results, in my opinion, are incredibly genuine. And with this case, because it has an ending that every romantic comedy has ended on since the dawn of time, it really goes to show how much modern day movies really owe itself to City Lights.
I will say that, the ditzy girl in here, what is it? Virginia Searle, she played the leading lady in White Heat, and she was no smart. So that was her character type.
Interesting.
Yeah, White Heat's great if you get a chance to check it out. I know I've talked in depth about that before.
I think you've mentioned it before, but I still take your word for it either way.
Yeah, James Cagney is wonderful. But yeah, City Lights is one I haven't seen in a while. I remember watching it as a kid, and I thought, yeah, the boxing sequence is the thing that stood out to me. So yeah. Coming in at my number 3, I have It, not the clown thing. It from 1927. I discovered this, and watched it.
Really?
Yeah. So it is a Roaring '20s romantic comedy. It's a silent rom-com. It launched the career of Clara Bow, and it basically encompasses this girl who meets a guy on this double-decker bus in a quirky comedic way with delightful orchestra music. And she gets ready and she goes on this really bizarre date with him. And then she decides to go yachting and say, you know what? I really like this guy. We've gone on a bunch of dates. Let's get married. And then they kiss on an anchor. And it's delightfully funny and quirky. And it sounds generic. But so they start off by getting on a bus and they bump into each other, like your cliche. But the way everyone else boards the bus and the way they paint the city and the way they have their flat and where they live, and just the way everything is set up is this quirky sort of sightseeing, setting up the whole setting. Then they get to go to a carnival, and this is the most confusing carnival I've ever seen in my whole damn life. It's really funny though. So they go to this carnival, and there's this fun they do a little dance sequence to some music, and they like dance on this spinning wheel, and they all fall down in like this perfectly like Raggedy Ann style, like all your Toy Story toys fall. And then they go on this like up and down stair machine that I'm comprehending who invented this at this carnival. It's like there's 2 stairways and they just rotate and you walk through on these rotating stairs, and I'm just like, what the heck is that? And then after a conversation with someone, she decides, you know what, my 2 friends need to get together, right? Because she's hanging out with this guy and she doesn't realize she loves him, but her 2 friends, she says, those people need to get together, right? So they go out boating and hijinks ensues and they fall in the water. And I mean, we get to the end of the film where, the 2 people who they're trying to get together get up on the boat. They're just friends, but the lady climbs up on the anchor, her high heel shoe drops off and like hits him in the head with like, I imagine there'd be a funky sound effect there, like a boink. and then they climb up on the anchor, and the people on the boat are like, they'd make a lovely couple, wouldn't they? And then they like kiss on the anchor, and it's quirky and it's fun. But this is part Great Gatsby, part oh my goodness, Meet Me in St. Louis, because it's basically a shopkeeper who falls in love with a playboy. So it's basically it's Notting Hill in a sense. It's literally Notting Hill, but from 1927, because there's a whole bunch of these films that were all related back to this very, very similar plot. And it's quirky and fun. And Clara Bow has this like really odd sense of style. She's not your typical Hollywood thing. But she's sort of like the weird, quirky, nerdy girl, I guess you'd call nowadays, where they're like, oh, look at that punk person. That's different. Let's try to do that and make it a thing. And it's called It. Now, this movie is, you ever heard the phrase the It Girl?
I've heard the phrase. I don't really know the full definition.
So the It Girl is like the cool, accessible neighborhood girl. That's
oh,
the idea.
okay, like the It
So
crowd.
yeah, so this is the phrase, the It Girl. This is where it came from, because Clara Bow was the It Girl, because it was from It. She was the big thing. She went on to do a lot of movies and such. I haven't seen 90% of them because they're old. I'm working on it. But this is a very delightful one. I like what it does with the text. It's quirky. It's fun. It sort of has a little bit of very complicated cinematography with some more of the moving shots, not crazy amounts. And it does some really, really fun sequences, and it does incorporate some dancing with the original composed music. So It from 1927 for my number 3.
Well, judging by the climax being on an anchor, I'm surprised it wasn't called Anchors Away.
That is a great flick. But that is a different flick.
Why am I not surprised that that's a title? My
Anchors
God.
Away. Gene Kelly, Frank Sinatra, 1952 musical. I think
No, it's just like Anchors Away, Splash, Slept Away, or Swept Away. Why did I say
Spirited Away.
Slept Away? Oh, I know why I said Slept Away, because Madonna and Guy Ritchie made that, and then it ruined their marriage.
Yeah, well, I thought it was quirky and fun, and I got a chance to watch it twice, and I was very happy.
I can totally understand that now. It does sound like a pretty above average
Whimsical.
rom-com,
It's
too.
like a whimsical rom-com. It makes you feel good. It's not too heavy, and it doesn't feel like it's from 1927. It feels like it could be from the 50s or 60s. It has
kinda
that sort of
sounds like-
timelessness to it, minus the fashion.
That kind of sounds like Amelie the more I think about it.
I haven't seen that in a while. What do you got?
I've never
here?
seen it because people are so split about it.
I know people who love that movie who swear by it. That's their favorite thing on the planet. So
Oh, I know, but for every person who loves it, there's one that just can't stand it.
it's a weird artsy movie. I mean, it's gonna be split.
Of course.
Want to watch it? You'll watch it. What do you got at number 2?
Well, speaking of artsy, my number 2 has got to be the most fucked up movie on this list. It is
I'm excited.
a Ukraine film told in Ukraine Sign Language, but here's the catch.
Okay.
There are no subtitles, there's no voiceover narration,
Okay.
and there is no title cards. You just have to watch everything that's happening on screen and judge for yourselves what the plot is, what exactly type of character arcs our characters are going through. And that's not even the weirdest or even most disturbing thing about The Tribe. The most disturbing thing about The Tribe is its plot. It's about a boarding school for deaf kids where the majority of students and teachers are a gang. The younger boys rob commuter trains and launder the money in their beds. Older boys either rob those trains as well, or if they're lucky and get higher up the food chain, they become pimps for the girls who go out and do service for truckers.
I've never heard of this.
Really? This sounds like a princess movie. Well, okay, an X-rated princess movie, but carrying on with what the story is about, our main character Sergey becomes a pimp after the original person that had that position got crushed by one of their clients who I guess wasn't looking in their mirrors and didn't see the guy behind them. You had to write in the deafness in there at some point, and they definitely do at given moments. But when he starts pimping out this one regular girl, he starts to fall in love with her, but things become a lot more complicated for both of them when it's very clear that she doesn't actually love him back. Now, if any of the audience members are still with me on this and are wondering how you can even understand what the fuck's going on, let alone understand so many bizarre and stupid choices that these characters do, there's a very routine structure to each of these scenes, because the director, whose name neither one of us would even dare try if we were paid $100 for it, he films every single scene in a long take that has a 3-act structure to it. So the first act is building up the mystery of what the scene's going to be about, and he does it by having characters go from one location to another. Act 2 is when they start a conversation, start a fight, or start to commit the crime that they're supposed to. And you have to focus on how fast they're signing, their body language, their facial expressions, and their staging within the frame to really understand what's going on. And then Act 3, whoever wins the power struggle establishes dominance over the person they're oppressing. So, for example, there's one scene where our main character is led to this alleyway. That's Act 1, building up the mystery, seeing what's going to happen to this kid. Act 2, there is an entire audience of other boys. There's one other older kid who's flexing his muscles. They shake hands, and then he and the main character start fighting. So it's clearly an initiation into the gang. And then Act 3, our main character proves himself by kicking this guy's ass, flaunting himself in front of the audience while the older boys were just keeping watch and make sure things don't go out of hand, tells him to cool it. So it's the first sign that this kid's got some problems, and he's going to only behave worse over time as he becomes higher up in the food chain. It's obviously a very bleak look at how people have to fight for equality, even among other members of the same minority group, which was a theme that really stuck with me ever since I saw it for the first time. And it's obviously so bleak that it gets in the way of the entertainment value because of the long take structure. Some scenes do feel longer than others, and depending on what time of day you watch it and depending when you watch it, it's going to really change which scenes drag and which scenes feel completely well paced. And the ending itself is so abrupt that I don't think it was for really any legit reason. But I got to admit, it's so compromising, it's so ballsy, and it's so skillfully well done, especially for a directorial debut. Literally every modern silent movie I have on this list is a directorial debut. Really put that into perspective. I legitimately want to see this again, even though it's incredibly fucked up. And the ending itself, even though it's abrupt, has one of, if not the most shocking and uncomfortable sequences in the entire film.
Yeah, I'm going to try to pronounce his name. I looked at the phonetic spelling. I think it's Myroslav Slawski.
That's as close as I can get to it, but this all started when he made a short film in the exact same style where it was one long take and there was a 3-act structure. But the difference was it was a conversation between a cop and one of the deaf kids within the cop car. It doesn't start off that way. It actually starts off in the parking lot where the cop writes out a note to one of the other kids saying, have you seen this kid? Can you go get him for me? And then when they write out a conversation, the cop makes it clear that he's detaining the kid, but when they put him in the car, they actually torture him for information. What that information is, because it has the exact same information left out, we don't really know for sure. And it's one of those instances where, because we don't know what the script is, even though the actors are all amateurs, sign language is such a specific form of communication that not knowing what they're saying and just focusing in on what they're doing actually really does work to its advantage.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check this out because I've literally never heard of it. So
whatever you do, don't screen share some of these images, because
I'm not going to. I'm not. No, I just wanted to share the animation. Just the animation I'd like to share.
You're looking at those pictures right now, aren't you?
No, I pulled up my next pick, but I did look up some pictures.
Okay, good. I'm pretty sure I know which one you did and which one you didn't.
They were actually IMDb's tamed the pictures down. I'm pretty sure. There's just pictures.
Okay, good, because my thumbnail for the video when I reviewed this, it was much more explicit, and I had to blow it up in order to hide certain things. But it was the only image I could use.
So my number 2 is I like the 1959 Charlton Heston version better, but if we're talking silent films, I don't think there's a more iconic silent film. And this, Ben-Hur. This is the 1959. This is the 2007 whatever.
Damn,
pressing.
that's a really good box set.
But yeah, this is a great box set because it comes with a box and it's got like 3D lettering, and it's got 4 discs. It's got a documentary. It's got the 1908 short. It comes with like a 40-page booklet over here. And
Wait,
it
is
has
that a Criterion or?
No, this is just a 4-disc collector's edition. And it also includes the 1925 Ben-Hur, which you will know is famous for someone getting trampled in the chariot races. That's from this version. So I like Ben-Hur. I like a lot. I like everything Ben-Hur has to offer me. Ben-Hur, 10 Commandments, Lawrence of Arabia, Das Boot. You give me an epic, I'm going to watch it. I don't like Gone with the Wind. Sue me. But Ben-Hur follows.
No one's going to give you crap for that, man, especially after why it got pulled off. Look at the way it got pulled off of Netflix. Almost, it's become more of a crime to defend it. Like, oh, we're going to take this off and really show them. It's just like, this is the first movie where a black person won an Oscar and you're taking it away.
My issue with Gone with the Wind is that the characters are really boring and wishy-washy, and it's like a really extended will they, won't they rom-com. I think there's some really cool sequences and color correction, but the will they, won't they rom-com, shit, I don't care about.
That I completely understand, and I know plenty of friends who feel that way.
I mean, well, like even TV shows, if you do too much will they, won't they, I'm out. Just they're doing it or they're not. Just done.
That's why. That's why I hate rom-coms. That's why I prefer City Lights and my number one over
there. This film is an older film, 1925. Every scene is like a painting in this film. It feels like sort of a Michelangelo like painting where they did like whether it's the painting of Christ or any of those like sort of those style. It's all set in that sort of lavish thing with this brown and gray tone, and it sets up this very beautiful sort of picturesque style film. They wanted to make it like a piece of art. It's very artistic. I don't know if this was a hit back in the day, but there's some really fantastic sequences. If you don't know the story of Ben-Hur, Ben-Hur is the guy who basically goes from being a wealthy nobleman to a slave to coming back to his own, racing in the chariot races, and then he randomly sees Christ die and then goes out and lives his life. And there's the Valley of the Lepers sequence and all that stuff, and his mother becomes a leper at one point, which is so this one here, the slave boat sequence, where they're all on the boat and they're rowing this boat, is particularly excellent. The exterior of the boat is well done. The interior of the boat is absolutely fantastic, and the way they execute the scene might actually be better than the 1959 version because of the set and the sheer amount of extras that they have available. Because there are a lot of extras in this movie. Let me tell you, on the boat, there's at least 60 people crammed into this space. That is not COVID space safe.
Too soon.
And then you have the chariot race, which is absolutely phenomenal, where literally they went out there with a camera and the horses were not behaving, and someone actually died by getting trampled by horses, it's not a legend, it's actually real, and it's from this movie. They kept it in there. You can see the guy die if you want. Then you have the Valley of the Lepers sequence, which is where they use a big, and the leprosy effects were really effective in black and white. There are so many extras in this film. Oh my actual goodness. They use some really interesting techniques. This is the first film to really use cutaways to really plant scenes that I can see. They use a walking shot of, particularly here, of the streets of Jerusalem when Ben-Hur is walking and his wet feet get on this thing, and they use this shot to transition, and they use the paddles of the boats and various other things as this very creative cutaway sequence. And then at the end of it, the city crumbles. They use the crumbling temple city walls, and this whole giant thing crumbles, and there's people running away from it. And I genuinely think people had to run away from a giant city that was going to crash on them. And it looks awesome. This movie is great from beginning to end. I like all the characters. There's not too much over the top acting. It's very grounded. It's very well done. I think this is the second best version of Ben-Hur that you're going to get out there, because number one being, 1959, this being number two, then the 1908 film, and then whatever that crap they did in 2014 was. That was not good.
There's okay, so other than the 2014 one where Morgan Freeman has dreads and
Yeah, it's a lot.
The chariot race is up to par with a Jason Bourne movie, which is not the style we want for a fucking
No,
chariot race.
no, keep it wide shots, keep it open.
But there's one that you don't know about. There's one that very few people know about.
The animated one, I think I watched as a kid.
Okay, so then you do know that one. And for those who are unaware, if any of you remember that one Rudolph the Reindeer TV special where Whoopi Goldberg was an ice queen, that studio made an animated Ben-Hur movie with Charlton Heston. Like, dude has two, one that's good and one that sucks.
Yeah.
Really put that into perspective.
And there's one guy in here. I want to try to find a picture of this dude. He looks straight up like Captain America. There it is. Okay, I'm just gonna. This guy makes me very happy.
I'm looking forward to this.
So this guy, you see the guy with the red there and the helmet. He's got like heavy eye makeup on and like those wings. He looks like really crappy Captain America, and it's the best thing.
I thought you were gonna say he looks like a crappy 4 comic, but
no, he looks like a terrible Captain America, like with the stupid wings. But I really like this version. I've seen it about 3 or 4 times now. It's sort of hard to get through because it's 2 hours and 22 minutes. For a silent film, I think that might be the longest silent film.
either that or Metropolis.
I think it's an hour and a half. But this is literally
no, like there's an over 2 hour long version of Metropolis just trying to be as close to Fritz Lang's original vision as they could possibly get.
Metropolis is a really cool film. I just think people talk about that film to death. So
I barely hear anybody talk about it.
Really? Because it's like the one film that everyone I know talks about to me. Like, oh, Metropolis.
Well, I mean,
Metropolis,
keep in mind, these are silent movies. I don't know that many people who are well versed in them.
I mean, I've watched a lot of silent films.
Oh, I'll bet you have.
Because I'm tired of the standard art medium we've got. So number 1, we're at the number 1, Tyler. What?
Yes, we are.
Number 1.
My number 1 is, in my opinion, the Chaplin movie that gets his later formula down the best in regards to developing characters, make us laugh at jokes, and also feel sad for these characters at the exact same time, especially when you're laughing at jokes that come a mile away and feel sad about, might say, you know good and hell well Chaplin's going to use based on the recurring themes and motifs that he puts in every single movie. And weirdly enough, that happens to be his final silent movie of all time, but I think it's his best. And yes, you guessed correctly, it is Modern Times.
Well, I mean, it's sort of his most iconic film besides the Dictator.
Well, it's definitely his most political silent movie, revolving around the tramp struggling to find a job in the Great Depression as the work industry was very conveniently at the worst time possible, replacing manual labor with this advanced, complicated machinery that no human could keep up with or could even adjust, let alone the tramp, which leads to some of the most memorable gags in the movie, especially when he goes for the assembly line and gets run over by gears, which I saw that scene yesterday and it still holds up to this day. Almost 100 years later, it still looks more convincing than some CGI effects that we get nowadays. I can't believe that Chaplin did that stunt in one take. It was the first movie where I realized that Chaplin doing all of his stunts in one take and doing the setup and the punchline in the same take just led to so much great effect. And I still don't know how they did that gear stunt, but it still feels incredibly authentic, as do really the rest of the slapstick routines in the movie. But much like City Lights, it feels like a much more intimate story where, as he's struggling to find a job, he comes across this runaway orphan played by Paulette Goddard, who needs to save enough money to provide a home for her younger siblings. And the one problem I have with Modern Times is that the movie halfway through just forgets about the siblings, and so does she as a character, because there are some fantasies. Well, because there's a fantasy of her like living in a rich house with the tramp and having such a luxurious life, and they're not in there. And I just sat there and I went, okay, this is disappointing. But at the same time, this is still easily the best partnership the tramp has ever had, because the two of them have so much more in common in the fact that they're all alone with no one else to depend upon. So the all of a sudden team up feels a lot more authentic, and it feels much more genuine because it really is out of necessity. And because, like most Chaplin movies, they do kind of develop the main romantic lead alongside the tramp before they actually meet each other. So that part felt much more, that part felt more necessary. And I'm trying to think what else is there to her, because I remember her so much more than the other romantic leads, but oh, that's right. For every opportunity that the tramp has for a job and completely fucks over, she gets just as many attempts and even bails him out more than he bails her out, which feels like a much more equal camaraderie than anything I've ever seen before, because there are so many times where he falls into a misunderstanding that gets him arrested and thrown in jail, but she's the one who's there when he's released. She's the one who bails him out and gets him a job at the place that she's working at. So it feels a lot more advanced and a little more ahead of its time in regards to making a strong female lead. I don't go into silent movies expecting a strong female lead, but I hope for one nonetheless. And with Modern Times, I definitely got that.
Now,
Almost
do you like the villain Al Ernest Garcia? You mentioned him in the previous pick.
Yeah, and it wasn't until yesterday that I realized that he was in Modern Times, because I don't remember him really standing out all that much. In fact, it's not even really a human villain that I care that much about in regards to the story, because I don't think the stakes are really about the villains. I think it just comes from the circumstances of the world that they're living in, because all too often Tramp has to face more often against cops who mistake him for a communist, because as he's walking from one job to another, there happens to be a communist rally and he happens to be the last person standing, and that's where things really get messy. But when he goes to jail and there's equal amount of food and shelter for everybody, but when he accidentally stops a prison break, the warden is so happy. It's just like, congratulations, you get to go out free. And he's just like, can I stay? You guys are free lodging. Which way to make prison sound worse than the real life. I know what he was trying to say with the messages, but not the best location to use as a metaphor for that type of thing. But I mentioned before, almost nobody talks about the musical score when it comes to silent movies. And I think part of that, and honestly, the musical score tends to be a flaw with certain silent movies, especially the ones that I put on this list, where they always sound so happy and cheerful, even when something incredibly shitty is going on screen. Like in The Circus, the score is almost 100% optimistic, even when the circus rider is getting the shit kicked out of her by her stepfather. But here, it actually bounces out the more uplifting song pieces with the more melancholy moments to an absolute great effect, especially with the romantic theme song, which we now know as the Nat King Cole or Jimmy Durante song Smile, because Chaplin wrote the orchestration, and it wasn't until Nat King Cole took that song, added in lyrics, and then it became such a hit classic. And I covered this in my review. Chaplin had a very weird way of writing music. He could play the piano, he could play the violin, but he wasn't an orchestrator, and he wasn't exactly the greatest at writing down sheet music. So he would always have an assistant nearby where he was playing something on the piano as he was imagining the sounds in his head, and he would go, write this down. So there's been a little bit of controversy over whether or not dude really composed it, based on the fact that dude did play the instrument and knew exactly how it was supposed to sound. I do think he technically did compose it, but I also do think that the other assistants should deserve equal credit. And with Modern Times' sake, the dude ended up doing the same thing. And then he went on, I think he did a couple scores for Laura or some other Hitchcock movies. But yeah. And I can't believe I'm saying this. They even find a way to make the black and white imagery have a symbolic nature to it, because the tramp and the orphan girl wear black over white clothes to signify the state of poverty that they're in. But there comes a point where they're in a department store, and while the tramp is doing that routine with the roller skates and it's just dangling over the side of the rail, that part is absolutely hilarious. The orphan is trying on these white silk bed sheets and these fluffy, furry white beds as she's sleeping and imagining a more luxurious life that is much more brightly lit, much more white based in regards to the set design and the costume design. And then when you snap back to reality, it's back to black over white. I'm not sure if that was the effect that they were going for, but it really does play off that way in regardless. And the ending, especially, often considered one of the most iconic final shots of the tramp and the orphan girl walking down the street looking for a better life. It is so memorable and it's so depressing, but still uplifting outlook for the future. Because even though we know everything bad that happened to us in the past, the future is a complete mystery, and we don't know if things are going to get better or worse. We will know if we take down that road and see for ourselves. And it's just such an endearing message. It's the type of message that we need nowadays, because let's face it, we're starting to really lose our grip on what's happening right now.
Yeah, just a little bit. When you mentioned the music, Alfred Newman is the composer or the conductor. He also did the music for V for Vendetta, How the West Was Won, Airport, and All About Eve. And Frank Meyer, who worked on there, also worked on sound for Stagecoach and Gone with the Wind. So you got quite an up and coming here for sound.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, it's been many years since I've seen this, but it is quirky, it is fun, it is very Charlie Chaplin. So yeah, good pick, good number one. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to argue with this on that. I have a very unconventional number one.
Do tell.
I've watched this now twice in the last week. I'm absolutely fascinated by the ability of, it's Zelma in its original Ukrainian title, ZMLYA, but in the English title, it's Earth. It is a 1930 film that follows and parallels religion and death in the most unusual and unique way humanly possible.
Wait, what's it called?
Earth, from 1930.
Okay.
So we open up with Simon, the grandfather to the grandson. His grandson has just died, and Simon is lying in a peach orchard, in a very artistic peach orchard where he's there, and they have this conversation with his son about how are we going to bury my grandson. And he's like, well, I want to bury him this way, and yada, yada, yada. And they have this conversation back and forth, but it's the way they shoot this is fascinating because it's only close-ups. The entire film is shot in close-ups. There is not a single wide in this film. It's either a medium or a close-up. Everyone is constantly in frame. And as we go on, the frames get tighter and tighter and tighter. So we follow the story. Simon wants to bury his grandson beneath the pear tree. That's what he wants to do. But the church says they should bury him in the graveyard. So he breaks away from the church, declaring himself to be an atheist, and buries his son beneath the peach tree with the help of the townsfolk. But along the way, his son gets killed. So now he has to figure out how he's going to bury his son. And that's the story. It's a multi-generational story of death. It's completely silent with Ukrainian subtitles, but they use constant shallow focuses, close-ups, and very minimum mediums to create this sort of very personal story with some of the best acting I've ever seen in a silent film. It's like French expressionism in its filmmaking to a percentage, but it's also got elements of Hollywood. It's very it has elements of Tarantino. Like, I don't know how many people have actually seen this film, but I think a lot of people have been inspired by this film. And what it does is it uses very long takes, just long takes of people talking, people doing things, people walking up a hill, medium or close-up follow shots. And we're always looking up on the subject. I think this is the most fascinating silent film I've ever seen in my life. I love it. It's wonderful. And I've never seen anything quite like it. The acting is on par. The cinematography is excellent. When you have two people in a frame, usually someone's slightly out of frame, which is very, very interesting to draw the center of focus, which is a film technique that I was studying a while back. If there's any blood or sweat or any, they've been working all day, they really do keep with the continuity of their clothes or and that sort of thing. Their hair is in continuity. The gentleman who leads us, Simon, Simon is a bearded gentleman who wears a hat and tattered clothes, who all he has is a peach orchard. All he has is his family. And it's this very interesting arc from point A to point B of watching someone die too young and then watching someone die from thieves on the road in a particularly interesting sequence where they don't actually show any violence on his part. They show the thieves and they show the father's reactions later. Earth, or Zelma, from 1930, I think is the greatest silent film ever made.
Huh.
Super
That's
earth.
very, very
Super.
heavy themes there. Like the way you describe it sounds more like something Agnes Varda would do. Or when you talk about people who have been influenced, I think there's some people who genuinely think that Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven has very similar imagery and similar story beats, and just altogether the whole fact where the plot isn't really the main focus, the scenery and how it reflects the story and what the characters are going through.
Well, I'll
as
show you
opposed
some
to having a
frames here,
straightforward
but this
plot.
is our main character, Simon. And this is every time we see Simon, he's either in this shot or a medium. We don't
Okay.
ever see him as a wide. When they're doing stuff, they do these cut off heads. The whole film is like from the perspective of a head. It's absolutely fascinating.
I can see what you mean by, like, when you said people were slightly out of frame,
Yeah.
I just sat there and went, oh gee, here we go.
And then
But
it's a
this
very
actually looks
soft
better.
focus. It's very effective for this story. I highly recommend this film. If you can, it's free on YouTube. So the story of Simon burying his grandson beneath a peach tree or a pear tree. Peach or pear?
Huh.
Peach, sorry. Is one of the most fascinating silent films you'll ever see. But the acting is on par with, like, I would say a Fellini film where all the characters are very unique and interesting, but they use dramatic pauses. There's not a lot of speaking. It's more they speak, they react. It's reaction. They knew exactly what to do with the tools they were given and the tools they had at the time. It wasn't, oh, we could do this or we could do this. It was, let's use what we have, let's use it to its fullest potential and tell an interesting story. So
That sounds like the right way to go. That's really what anyone should set out to do when they make a movie.
Zelma, best silent film of all time.
Wow.
Up there with Modern Times. Modern Times is a very popular pick, very good film, and it's popular for a reason because it's good.
I just like the fact that we both picked Ukraine ones, and I picked the one that wasn't propaganda.
Yeah, I was hoping that you did not pick propaganda, the Ukraine film I picked, because I watched this film. I was just looking at some silent films, and I went to like the top 10 list, and everyone was talking about this film, and I'm like, whoa. It also really rebels against the government too. It's a very rebellious film about rebelling against the Catholic Church and the government and their associations in the early years of. Well, that's still a thing. So so it's a very rebellious film to say he's going to do his own thing and do what he wants with his grandson. So,
well, as long as dude got away with it scot-free, or as long as people got to see it, regardless of what happened to him.
It's very renowned. It's been re-released multiple times, I guess, on DVD and VHS, and it's a very renowned film. Because I guess it was vague enough that it didn't quite tack the government. It was just like it tacked old systems that no one cared about.
Which is interesting, because one of my reviews coming up is about a movie that has dealt with some banning and censorship, among other things.
Is it The Interview? No, just kidding. Anyway,
That wasn't even that good a movie.
There was like one good sequence in there where they were singing Katy Perry's Firework in a tank. Other than that, I was like, nah.
I don't know. I like the stuffing the tracking device in the tiger and that blowing up.
I had higher hopes for that film. I thought it'd be funnier. But
We
anyway,
all had higher hopes because it got censored and threatened and stuff.
yeah, I thought it would be like really over the top and really dirty and just like completely in your face. And I was like, oh, this could be like a really raunchy like thing. They just hate it because, you know, Kim Jong-un is running around with katana and killing sheep or something. I don't know.
Well, worst of all, it was Randall Park being Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, it wasn't great. It was okay. It exists.
Yeah.
At least it had a 3-hour story structure and they shot it and the sound was good.
Yeah, I guess.
So tell us what we've got looking forward to on your channel, Tyler Wolf.
Okay, so like I've been saying on Chance Encounters, I'll be having a review up for Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead, and we can find out whether or not I will like a Zack Snyder movie from beginning to end. Based on what people have been saying, the fact that you made a heist movie during a zombie apocalypse, that does sound like a pretty badass concept. And as everyone's been saying, this is further proof that Dave Bautista is more talented than we give him credit for. And I already knew that, but I'm looking forward to seeing more proof of that. And as I've been teasing before, I'm probably going to have this review up first because everyone's already talked about Army of Dead. We're going to have a review up of the Iranian anthology drama There Is No Evil, about 4 stories involving capital punishment in Iran. And because Iran does not like to be criticized in the slightest, this director has been arrested for this and 2 other movies. And when he starts to serve his prison sentence, let alone finish it, he won't be able to make a movie for another 2 years. But based on the other arrests and ban and the fact that he has no passport, so he can't get out of Iran, I don't think this is going to teach him anything. But there's a story to be had about it.
Yeah, if you get a chance to check out Tyler, this is not a movie. Have you heard of that?
It sounds familiar.
It's a documentary, a film about a guy who can't make films anymore, so he makes a documentary about his life and his government censorship.
Was it back in 2010?
No.
Nope, that's not it. Oh, it was
2019.
recent. Oh, it's recent. Okay, that's
he literally is not allowed to make films in Beirut because he's been arrested so many times and jailed. So he's literally making a film from his home.
I've seen posters of this.
It's really fascinating. It's a blog style thing about him just going around talking about, I can't make a movie, but we're making a movie anyway. Seriously fascinating.
A war correspondent. Wow.
Yeah, check it out if you get the chance. Great flick. Yeah. So
well, this has the TIFF logo on it, so I could have. And you know what? TIFF did say that they might start announcing the movies for this year's festival in June, so there is something to look forward to.
Well, anyway, check out all the shows on Sharp and Cinematics. Chance Encounters of the Improv Kind with Tyler, The Nonsense Show with Tyler. Check out Community Cast, Suits in Cinema, the Elisa Versus series. We are now jumping into season 3. We've got classic clips all popping up through the week, as well as this show, the Josh and Tyler Show, on June 5th. Look forward to Saving Grace, my psychological horror film. Thanks for joining us on the Josh and Tyler Show. And Tyler, you know what time it is. Say something awesome.
Well, because modern times gave us smile, I'm going to sing something awesome. If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you.
That's how I dance when I'm up at the club. No one wants to dance with me.